Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories in the weekend. I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. The UK Prime Minister Theresa May and the embattled Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn have clashed at the Prime Minister's question time over shortage of council housing, high cost of housing for first-time buyers, and excessive housing benefits payment being given to private landlords for houses considered to be unfit for habitation. Mr. Corbyn was lamenting the huge shortage in council housing, claiming that there is a housing crisis in Britain.
Speaker, the average house price in Britain is now £215,000, over 8 times the average wage. The average price of a first-time buyer's home has risen by 12% in the past year. Isn't the dream of a home ownership for many people just that, a dream?
First of all, in response to the first point that the Right Honourable gentleman made, President Xi congratulated me on the United Kingdom's success in the Olympic Games. He raises the issue of housing, which he's raised on a number of occasions with my predecessor, but also with me before the summer recess. And I will say simply this: of course, it is important for us to look at helping people get their first rung, their step on that first rung of the housing ladder, and ensuring that people are able to have the home that they want. That's why I'm pleased that house building has been up under a Conservative government compared to a Labour government, but we're not complacent. That's why we will be doing more to see more houses built under this Conservative government, and also continue to provide support for people to ensure that they have that financial support that helps them to own their own home.
Jeremy Corbyn.
See, Mr. Speaker, house building under this government is 45,000 a year less than it was under the last Labour government. And for those who are desperate to get their own place, I just refer the Prime Minister to a note I received from a lady called Jenny, whose partner and herself work in a supermarket, earning £7.37 an hour each. They're trying to get a mortgage, and they've been told they can borrow £73,000. Not much hope for them then. The former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Witney, promised that there would be a one-for-one replacement for every council house that is sold under right to buy. Sadly, the reality is there's only one for every 5 that are sold. Will the Prime Minister give us a commitment on the one-for-one replacement, and when it will be a reality?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, can I say to Jenny that I fully understand and appreciate the concerns that individuals have about wanting to be able to have their own home and to set up that home, and I fully recognise the difficulties that there are for some people in doing that. I have to say to the Right Honourable gentleman that actually, in relation to the figures on council houses, he's wrong. We have delivered on the one-for-one replacement on the right to buy. But I'm very interested because I did notice that the Right Honourable gentleman had asked all his Twitter followers what questions he should ask me this week. So I thought I would look to see what sort of responses he'd received. I have to say that the first one was quite good. In fact, he might want to make sure he stays sitting down for this. Lewis writes, "Does she know that in a recent poll on who would make a better Prime Minister, Don't Know scored higher than Jeremy Corbyn?" Mr. Speaker, what we do know is that whoever wins the Labour Party leadership, we're not going to let them anywhere near power again.
Mr. Speaker, the number of first-time buyers has halved in the last 20 years, and their average age has increased a great deal. There is a housing crisis in Britain. 10 million people now live in the private rented sector, many forced to claim housing benefit to cover costs of rents. Devastating figures released over this summer show that £9.3 billion of public money is paid through housing benefit directly into the pockets of private landlords. Does the Prime Minister think this £9.3 billion into the private rentals market is really money well spent?
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that he starts off talking about the importance of people actually being able to be in their own homes, and then challenges one of the measures that actually helps people to get into their own homes through housing benefit support in the private rented sector. So it may be that he just has an ideological objection to the private rented sector. What I say is what this government is doing is ensuring that what we are doing is looking across the board. So we will see more houses being built. We are looking to ensure that there is a diversity of opportunity for people in terms of getting their own home. But I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that everything that he says just tells us all we need to know about modern Labour. The train's left the station, the seats are all empty, the leader's on the floor, even on rolling stock they're a laughing stock.
Mr. Speaker, her predecessor, in discussing this issue, said the simple point is that every penny you spend on housing subsidy is money you cannot spend on building houses. And if landlords rent out houses in a very bad state, such as heavy, damp, wet walls, no working toilet, they need to be getting a fine. The government has to regulate. That's what Joyce wrote to me. And the Citizens Advice Bureau says 1/6 of housing benefit goes to private sector landlords renting out unsafe homes. Does the Prime Minister think this really is a satisfactory state of affairs?
I say to the right honourable gentleman that if he thinks that housing benefit is actually such a bad thing, why was it that when we changed the rules on housing benefit, the Labour Party opposed those changes that we took place? Now, we have changed, he talks about bad landlords, we have changed the rules on selective licensing. We are making changes. We've given councils free rein to impose burdensome bureaucracy on landlords giving councils free rein to impose burdensome bureaucracy would lead, we think, to problems within the market, which would actually lead to higher costs for both tenants and landlords. We're introducing new regulations in relation to housing in multiple occupation. So we are looking at all of these issues. I recognise, as every member of Parliament in this House will, the problems that people sometimes have when they are living in accommodation that is not up to the standard that we would all wish to see people living in. That's why we are changing the rules, and we are ensuring that the regulations are there.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that's extremely interesting, Mr. Speaker, because only a year ago, the Prime Minister voted against a Labour amendment to the housing bill, which quite simply said all homes for rent in the private rented sector should be fit for human habitation. And just over a year ago, the Treasury estimated that it is losing £500 million per year on unpaid tax from landlords renting in the private rented sector. So we have it, £9.5 billion in housing benefit, £500 million not being collected, a very large number of homes not really fit for human habitation. Doesn't this require government intervention on the side of the tenant and those in housing need?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman asks for the government to intervene. The government has, through the Housing and Planning Act, introduced further tough measures, civil penalties, banning orders for serious offences, extending rent repayment orders. We've provided money so local authorities can conduct more inspections of properties, of people's homes. We have seen more properties being inspected. We now see thousands of landlords facing further action. So far from not taking action in this area, The government has. But I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman this: he may have a model of society where he doesn't want to see private landlords, where he wants to see the government owning everything, the government deliberating on everything, the government doing everything for everybody. That is not what we want. We want opportunities for people. We want to help them to take those opportunities. It's a big difference between him and me.
Of course, we all recognise there is a mixed housing economy, but we want to make sure that those living in the private rented sector.
Also, the Prime Minister Theresa May has said Britain is set to become a global leader in free trade as it leaves the European Union. The Prime Minister, who was speaking at the G20 summit in China, stated that Britain has had a long history of being a trading nation, and it is set to secure trade deals with leaders around the world.
This has been my first G20 summit and the first summit of the world's leading economies since the United Kingdom decided to leave the European Union. It has been an opportunity to showcase Britain as a bold, outward-looking nation. We're the fifth largest economy in the world, the second fastest growing major economy in the world last year. We're ranked in the top 6 countries in the world as a place to do business. We have record employment, and the deficit has been cut by almost 2/3 since its peak in 2010. So we can be confident about the fundamental strengths of the UK economy and optimistic about the role we will forge for the UK, building on our strength as a great trading nation in the future. And here in Hangzhou, I've had the chance to talk to other leaders about the role that the United Kingdom will play to advance free trade, to make sure the world's economies work for everyone, and to confront the global challenges of terrorism and migration. Let me say a few words on each. First, free trade. Britain has a proud history as a trading nation, and we have long been one of the strongest advocates of free trade. A rules-based, open and inclusive global trading system can act as a catalyst for sustainable economic growth, and the right trade agreements can be the greatest anti-poverty policy of our time. That's why at this summit we've agreed to oppose a retreat to protectionism. As G20 countries, we've extended the rollback of protectionist measures until at least the end of 2018. We have committed to ratify by the end of this year the WTO agreement to reduce the costs and burdens of moving goods across borders. And we've agreed to do more to encourage firms of all sizes, in particular SMEs and female-led firms, to take full advantage of global supply chains. And as the UK leaves the EU, I've set out our ambition to become the global leader in free trade. In my bilateral meetings, I've signalled our determination to secure trade deals with countries from around the world. The leaders from India, Mexico, South Korea and Singapore said that they would welcome talks on removing the barriers to trade between our countries. And the Australian Trade Minister will visit the UK this week to take part in exploratory discussions on the shape of a UK-Australia trade deal. Later this week, I will chair a meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Brexit and International Trade to discuss how the government should pursue an ambitious trade strategy and to work out which markets we should prioritise. As we do more to advance free trade around the world, so we must do more to ensure that working people really benefit from the opportunities created by free trade. This discussion goes to the heart of how we build an economy that works for everyone. It's not enough just to take a hands-off approach.
US President Barack Obama has reaffirmed US special relationship with Britain will remain despite Brexit. Speaking at a press conference during the G20 summit in China, the two countries expressed their commitment to inclusive global sustainable growth, transatlantic security architecture, and a commitment to root out all forms of terrorist networks around the world.
Even as the UK pursues an orderly exit from the EU, together we reaffirm the very special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. It will not simply endure, but it will continue to grow stronger with time. The vibrant economic partnership between our countries will continue. As the UK gains further clarity on its new relationship with the EU, our two countries will be discussing ways in which we continue to sustain and strengthen our trade and investment ties. Here at the G20, we will continue to pursue an agenda of inclusive and sustainable growth. When it comes to security issues, under Prime Minister May, the UK has reaffirmed its strong commitment to the transatlantic security architecture. We are NATO allies. We see the world in the same way. We will continue to oppose Russian aggression in Ukraine. We will continue to counter cyber threats. We will continue to work diligently to root out terrorist networks, and will work to destroy ISIL. At a time when the international order is under strain, I also emphasize the degree to which United Kingdom's leadership on the world stage is essential. We are grateful for the UK's indispensable role in achieving landmark agreements on climate change, on issues of energy security and global development. We will continue to count on being able to stand together, stand strong with our British friends to make sure that international norms and rules are enforced and are maintained. The bottom line is that we don't have a stronger partner anywhere in the world than the United Kingdom, and despite the turbulence of political events over the last several months, we have every intention to making sure that that continues. And so I look forward to our partnership. This is my last G20, Teresa's first, but the continuity of the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom, that stretches back many decades, and it will continue for many decades to come. Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to be here at my first G20 summit, and pleased to have had the opportunity to meet you, Barack. And as you say, the United States is a special partner for the United Kingdom, a long-standing ally and a close friend. We share the same values of freedom, openness and tolerance. We share intelligence and technology. Our troops train, fight and recuperate together. And together we do more together than any other two countries in the world. And I think that's as true now as it has ever been. And our discussions today have been wide-ranging. We've focused on Brexit, on the threat from Daesh, the situation in Syria, and on the need to do more to solve the migration crisis. I'd just like to say a few words on each of those. First, we have talked about Britain's decision to leave the European Union, the process now and what Brexit means for the UK's relationships with our European friends, but with other countries too. The UK has always been a strong partner for the US, and that will remain the case. We have a thriving economic relationship. British businesses export twice as much to the United States as they do to our next largest market, and the United States is the largest inward investor in Britain, with total American investments providing more than 1 million jobs. We need to build on that strong foundation as the UK leaves the EU. We're both strong supporters of free trade. And today we've discussed how to take forward consultations to ensure that the UK and US have the strongest possible trading relationship. And this reinforces my belief that as we forge a new global role for the UK, we can and will seize the opportunities that Brexit presents and make a success of it. We've also discussed the threat from Islamist terrorism. The UK and the US have been at the forefront of efforts to defeat Daesh in Iraq and Syria, and it's vital that we take action to degrade Daesh abroad to help keep the streets of Britain safe. And the coalition is making progress. Daesh is losing territory in Iraq and Syria, its finances have been hit, its leaders are being killed, and fighters are deserting. And in recent weeks, thanks to US efforts, Daesh in Libya have been forced backwards too. But we must not be complacent. We know these terrorists are intent on destroying our way of life, and the threat in the UK remains severe. So as we drive Daesh out of one area, we must be alert to the risk that they will seek a safe haven elsewhere, and we must work internationally to defeat their ideology of hatred and murder. And we need to support other countries in the region, helping to protect them from the threat of Daesh, and thereby protecting people home in Britain too. We must also continue to strive for a political situation in Syria. The goal remains a negotiated settlement which delivers stability for all Syrians and a government with whom we can work to defeat the terrorists. We welcome US efforts to broker an end to the violence and to help protect moderate opposition forces. It's vital that humanitarian supplies get to innocent Syrians who are in desperate need, and this afternoon I will urge President Putin to do all he can to get the aid convoys in and to end the indiscriminate bombing of civilians. And next week, the Foreign Secretary plans to host the moderate Syrian opposition in London as we continue to support their hopes for a democratic, peaceful and inclusive Syria. And finally, we discuss the global migration crisis. Across the world, there are now over 244 million migrants, 65 million displaced people, and over 20 million refugees. This growing crisis cannot be solved by the actions of one country alone. We need an international approach which better identifies those refugees who most need support, deals more effectively with economic migrants, and does more to address the root causes of migration. This issue will be top of the agenda at the UN General Assembly later this month, and I hope we can make concrete progress to stem the flow of migration and help people in their home countries and regions. So we've had a productive meeting. It's been an opportunity to discuss how we respond to some of the great challenges we face. And I look forward to continuing our discussions at the summit, particularly on the global economy. We understand that many of our citizens are frustrated by the pace of globalization and feel they're not experiencing the benefits of international trade. We both believe this is an issue that we as G20 leaders cannot afford to ignore. Instead, we must all work together to spur economic growth, to boost free trade, and build a fairer economy that truly works for all.
To Africa, Nigeria, the recent visit of Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg to Nigeria has been said to have inspired Nigerian entrepreneurs. Nigeria, with a higher percentage of young people, has been told can make high turnover from young Nigerian entrepreneurs if government supports their aspirations.
Ima Okena and his team are still excited. They were one of 3 teams that got to present their business proposal directly to Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. With the help of Microsoft, the Trackology team developed an easy way for the government to track utility bill payments.
We made a patented process where we put barcodes up on your buildings, and so government or the utility companies can verify real time whether you've paid or not and offer those services.
Their pitches were seen by Mark Zuckerberg, who was on his first trip to Nigeria.
You know, this trip has really blown me away by the talent of the entrepreneurs and the developers in this country, and by the focus on building something that's going to make a difference and going to make a change.
Okena's company and the other 2 finalists each won a surprise cash payment of about $8,000. The government wants to encourage youth techies in hopes of sparking Nigeria's economy, hit hard by low oil prices. Trackology wasn't the only startup competing.
What we make is a web-enabled multi-source energy monitoring device. It's kind of like a utility meter, but it measures power consumption from all the different power sources you have.
We are creating uncommon farmers in urban spaces using container farming.
New public workspaces to encourage tech entrepreneurs are opening up in Abuja.
If you're based in Abuja, if you're based in the north, then you can, pop into Ventures Park, be relaxed, work on your products, and get all the resources, all the backends you need to be able to thrive like, the startups in Lagos, in Africa, in Silicon Valley, in the US.
If the government's hopes are realized, one of Abuja's startups will blossom and become the next Facebook.
So we conclude the news roundup for today, and thank you for being part of the program. Tunde Alabi, and the rest of your week. Bye.